Hello and welcome to an Everyday Canines video. In this episode in Distance Handling 101 Foundation Skills, I want to talk to you about self-control versus drive. Now I've said self-control versus drive because very often people think they're two separate things. They think you can have one without the other. You get people say, well, he's a high drive dog. I just can't get the start line weights and the self-control, but he is high drive. Or vice versa. Oh, he's got lots of control, but not much drive. When we're doing any form of agility or any form of training, we want both. We want a self-controlled high drive dog. And that isn't an impossibility because actually, in fact, those two things feed into each other. And when you've got a high drive dog, self-control helps to increase that drive. And it also means that the dog is able to do exercises safely, efficiently, and not make mistakes. So let's talk about what we mean first off. Why people sometimes say, well, I've got one or the other. So the misconception is that self-control means a dog that is slow and that's doing an exercise steadily, consistently. That's not true. The self-controlled dog is a dog that can go at high speed but knows when to slow down and control its body into any form of obstacle. The obvious one here is weave poles. So as I've said, weave poles are the obvious one where a dog needs self-control because the dog has got to find that entry and then it's got to control its body as it goes through, but do it fast because we don't want slow weaves. So a straight entry, once the dog gets it, is usually not too bad even for high drive dogs because it's quite straight to go in. Ready, pulse, come on, get it. Most dogs, even when they're high drive, will be able to do that. But that's not the entries we get a lot in competition. A lot of the time we get entries that are harder. They are perhaps from a side or a funny angle. What we need is a dog that's got the self-control to find that entry, slow down enough to get it, and then speed up and drive through. Ready, pulse, pulse. Good girl. Like that. So that is self-control with drive. And we can make it even harder and say, I want you to have extreme self-control by asking you to do a complete 180 into the weave poles. And that is a lot of self-control required to do that. But a dog that's got both should be able to do it and then power on. Ready. I didn't say. Ready. Go pulse. Get it. So you see, that's what you need. You need both to be able to have a successful agility dog. And Swift is a low drive dog, but as you can see, the self-control has not diminished her drive. A dog that's full of drive can power at those weave poles and throw itself in them, but if it hasn't got the self-control to find the entry, it will either miss the entry or it will go in and pop out. And you just won't get that consistency. So their weaves are always going to be hit and miss. So you see dogs that have got wonderful drive and they weave fast. They might be able to get a straight entry, which is they can just slide in. But any time the entry gets slightly harder, they haven't got the self-control to find that entry, to figure out they've got to slow just a fraction to turn back on themselves to get their first pole before they speed up again. So we've got here another example of self-control, and that's the start line self-control where we want them to hold their weight. Now, if we have a dog that's got the self-control to hold a weight, we can also get it revved up. Sit. So you see I talked for a bit and Swift was ready to go, but she knew she wasn't ready to go because I don't normally talk when I'm doing this on the start line. But the whole point is she's ready to go. And now she's going to power down this line to this tunnel. So I'm going to get her ready. Go! Tunnel! Was that a dog? That's a low drive dog who just powered down that line at full pelt from a self-control position. So you can have self-control and drive even in a low drive dog. They are not mutually exclusive. They work together. The start line weight, especially when we're distance handling, is essential. It means that the handler can get where they need to be. It means the handler can be ahead and primed and ready, and A dog that understands its start line weight will be actually priming itself to go, and it increases drive because it gives them that, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. It's a bit like doing restrained recalls. When we do restrained recalls with a puppy, because we're restraining them, they rev themselves up because we want to get there. It's the same if you've got a really good start line weight. The dog is ready and it's listening. It's already keyed into the handler. Another example of self-control is the dog walk. The dog has to have a lot of self-control and body awareness to be able to negotiate the dog walk safely and to hit the contact correctly and accurately over and over again. Another example, seesaw. What we see is we get high drive dogs that zoom up the seesaw, but they haven't got the self-control to stop, so they just fly off. That also can be due to misconception. They're not appreciating that this is the seesaw rather than the dog walk. That's a different story. But you do see it. The dog just doesn't appreciate the performance it needs to put in, so it just powers up. No self-control over that end point where they actually need to put in a lot of restraint. They need to hold back, they need to adjust their weight, let the board go down before they move on. Again, that's a safety thing as much as we're wanting something that's consistent and accurate and enables to put in our best performance. A dog that's high drive and self-controlled is the balanced dog, and that's what we're aiming for. Now, you might say you're going to come probably from one aspect or the other, because generally we all have one or the other. We have the dog that's got a lot of self-control, apparently, or a lot of drive. So let's just split that up. When people say, oh, my dog's, he does a lovely weight, he does this, he gets his contact because he's steady, they tend to consider that self-control. And they see that as, well, he's got that. We haven't got the drive because the dog doesn't power around, but we've got that. What they're not seeing is that you cannot have true self-control over something that doesn't make you really want to race at it. Example, I'm not keen on roller coasters. I don't like them. It takes no self-control on my part whatsoever for me to say I'm not going on that, or I'm not going near it. I don't want to. So that's not self-control because I'm doing something that I'm not enthused about. If I'm not enthused about it, you haven't got to have self-control to avoid it, because it's not something that I have to do. It's the same with the dogs. If they're not infused for agility for whatever reason, and it might be to do with the fact that it might be competition versus training, it could be a lot of things, but if they're not infused, you can't judge whether they've got self-control, because you don't need self-control to not do something you don't want to do or you're not particularly excited about. In contrast, if you've got me and I really love roller coasters, I'm a roller coaster nut and I'm an adrenaline freak and I want to get on every single roller coaster I see, then I potentially have to have self-control to stand in a queue and wait to get on there because I want to do it. Same with the dog that's high drive. Now we can see whether that dog has got self-control because that dog really wants to do something. So you can't have self-control unless you have high drive for agility, because there is no self-control unless the dog really wants to do something. Let's go to the flip side. The dog that's high drive but doesn't have the self-control. The dog that's high drive and it's throwing itself around the course. Wow, yeah, he's getting there, he's going around the course. Yes, well, I've got drive. But the problem is, if he hasn't got the self-control to manage himself when he needs to, he's going to be making lots of mistakes. So you're not going to get around a course. Or you're going to get despondent with the dog because it does it. Oh, he missed that weave entry again. Oh, the contact again. This becomes a negative feedback loop for the dog. The dog senses the handler is not happy. They perhaps are constantly being asked to retrain stuff, because they don't get it right the first time, because they haven't got the element of self-control. This then becomes a thing for the dog that knocks their confidence. So then you start to lose the drive. Whereas if the dog had the self-control to hit weave pole entries, to get the running contact and be safe across the plank, all those things would mean the dog didn't have to constantly keep making mistakes. They would be getting it right the first time, and that would increase their drive, because anything you do you're successful at improves your confidence. Both these types of dog need both elements, high drive and self-control. I put it down as self-control versus high drive because that tends to be what people look at, but in actual fact, we want both. During this course, I'm going to show you a mixture of exercises. We're going to do some exercises that are about drive. We're going to do some exercises about self-control. At this stage, we're not going to be mixing them up too much, but we will eventually, because this is all foundation levels. We're just putting in those elements. But over the course of this series, you will see how important it is to have both. Now, some people will say, well, I need to start working on drive first. and then I'll worry about the self-control. No, we work on them in tangent. You can't do one thing over and over again and then change up the criteria. If we do so much, say the classic one is the tunnel monster. You've done loads of stuff where your puppy runs into the tunnel, well, young dog, because that was the easy one you could do. It's the thing people have. It's an easy, low impact on the dog, straight tunnels, and it's fun for the dog. You've done it loads, great. The problem now is every time the dog sees a tunnel, it just charges at it. So now you're trying to put in that self-control of, actually there's a jump there, or I need you to do this, or I need you to wait before there. But because the puppy is, or the young dog is so built up to run into that tunnel, you're battling over that to get the self-control. Whereas if you'd done both at the same time and mixed up how you did it, a balanced training program where the dog is learning self-control along with drive, then you've got a dog that is set up to succeed. It's very tempting though to focus on one, because we worry. We think if we put in that self-control, and maybe my dog isn't as high drive as some other dogs, so I'm getting that drive into the tunnel, and then I think, if I now start asking for that self-control, will I lose that drive? And that's a scary thought. If you have got a low drive dog, you go, am I going to wreck what I'm doing? You won't if you do it correctly and you keep pushing the idea that drive comes with self-control. You won't. But it is that thing we all think. We've all done it. I've done it. You think, I've got a low drive dog, I'll work really hard on driving down lines, then I'll worry about whether they can do a weight, whether they can do this. So these elements fit in all together. And it comes into a lot of factors in life. But we will be looking at this. And also we've got the new Pup to Pro series coming out soon. And there'll be elements in there you'll see where I intersperse now self-control with drive. And I'm doing that a lot more than I did with Swift, who I did what I just said I shouldn't do. I focused a lot on drive, didn't do so much on the self-control. And with Magpie, I was definitely more careful, which is why Magpie had a pretty good start line weight right from the get-go. Over this series, we're going to be looking at a mixture of these exercises, and I do recommend that you do both. You may say to yourself, well, I'm going to concentrate on those drive and I'll come back to this. I do recommend whatever dog you've got, do both, mix them up, do a session. I always try and do a bit of self-control, a bit of drive in a session. So do try and mix them up, because it will benefit you. Because at the end of the day, a self-controlled, drivey dog is the best dog for agility. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that's explained a few things to you. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can do so by clicking the button at the corner of the screen and click the bell icon, and it'll tell you when new videos are out. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok now. And I hope to see you all again very, very soon.